Well, here we are on Monday afternoon. Good afternoon to you, Pat.
How's it going, Jude?
Is the temperature rising there? Is it the
Jude,
political
the sun
or
has
the
just
literal or the meteorological?
I was chatting to our postman this morning, and he says we're some race of people, aren't we? He says we spent all year complaining about the cold, and he's now we're 3 days of heat, and we're complaining about the heat. But Jude, it is unbelievable. Like, this is Spanish weather. What do you call the place in County Down? Ballycock? What a name, by the way. 31.2 degrees on Saturday. The highest temperature ever recorded in Northern Ireland.
Well, we should be alarmed because it's got to do with global warming, I'm sure. But at the same time, I find myself reveling in it. I really, except at night, I find it a wee bit difficult to sleep. But other than that, it's just so wonderful.
Absolutely.
In fact, I was thinking, Pat, why do we pay so much attention to good weather? Like, why are we so? I find people are much more cheerful if you meet them.
Absolutely.
And the sun's shining. And if you meet them on a bad day, they say, God, that's an awful bloody day. And they're almost down before they start a conversation. It's not really fair when you think about it, because, so what if it's raining? It's quite interesting if it's raining too.
Well, Jude, I remember I was in America in 1972, and I remember I used to have to get up about 5:30 in the morning because I had a job. But it was no problem getting out of bed when the temperature was 80 and 90 degrees. What do you call it? It's Fahrenheit, like equivalent to maybe about 32, 33, and it was absolutely low. Come back on a December day in Donegal, and you look out, and there's frost on the window and all the rest, and you're in a warm bed. Tell me, which would you prefer, getting out of bed? I just turned over and went back to sleep.
Well, that's true. That's true. And I that's one of the things. I don't miss the winters in Canada, but I miss the summers. And that's what we're getting now. Is what you might have that for a month or two. Wonderful.
That's absolutely
superb. Do you remember 1976, Pat?
Absolutely. It's the year I got married, Jude.
Because that was the year I came over to England. But Prince Charles was giving out advice about how to conserve water, and he suggested to people they should put a brick into their cistern, their lavatory cistern. Was it the same? Do you remember that?
I think I vaguely remember that. But there was about 3 summers in a row. I think it might have been 75, 76, 77. We had long, hot summer's days every year, and I don't think we've ever had anything like it. Now, last year was there about 5-6 weeks about May where it was beautiful. But hey, we're so unused to that weather like this, Jude. We can't deal with it. I heard even a woman on the radio this morning, Claire Burns, saying she just can't deal with it. She had to go indoors after about 5 minutes sitting outside.
Well, I see on the news an awful lot of people, and I see people around here who seem to spend a lot of time in the sun. They don't appear to have heard of skin cancer. Like, I was looking at a man yesterday, and he was wearing a short sleeve shirt, and his arms, if you just look at his arms, don't look at the rest of him, I suppose even you look at his face, but look at his arms were the arms of a Spaniard or maybe even an African. Yet the man himself was 100% Irish. He clearly was going out and soaking up the sun deliberately. And you see crowds of people on beaches and stuff. I mean, that cannot be good for your
the number of skin cancer is a massive thing. See, we Irish are so white because we live in a climate where it rains. About 300. No way Spain gets 300 days sunshine a year. We get about 300 days rain a year. So our skin is absolutely almost pure white. So along comes a bit of sun, and I don't think it does us a lot of good if we overdo it.
That's right. Well, the difficulty is to say, what if we overdo it? If I don't go out and sit in the garden for a while, I feel I'm wasting the nice sunshine.
Yeah, exactly. Jude, I sat out Saturday night. We actually had our sort of food outside, and we sat outside. And like, Jude, this is like, what do you call that? Outdoor dining. What's the Spanish or the French term for? There's a French term for outdoor dining. It just escaped me at the minute. But anyway, al fresco. Is that French? But anyway, so like it's lovely, and the very fact that you can do it is fabulous, absolutely fabulous. And like is this the 5th or 6th day now that we've had it? Apparently it's going to last until Friday.
I remember when I was a kid at school. I remember our teacher saying to us, Ireland. He was teaching geography, and he said, boys, Ireland is a very lucky country. It's got a temperate climate.
I remember that.
So what do you mean the temperate? And he said it's a very even, good climate. I was saying, what are you talking about? And he made the point, that we neither have extremes normally of heat or cold. And to that extent, we are lucky. We maybe give out about the rain, but we overall the climate we have compared to other people. You look at places like Los Angeles or the south of France or
Death Valley,
Mediterranean, or even Germany now. But I still don't quite understand. I wish somebody explained to me, why is it, and novelists do this too. They do this where they call it the pathetic fallacy, that if the hero is having a hard time, it's pouring rain outside. Things are looking up, the sun comes out.
Yeah.
Why?
It's all part. What's your, the rain and cold? Like there's just Depressionville right away, but it's a good setting, Hey, have you ever watched a program which I've tended to watch this last week called Shetland? It's obviously set in Shetland, and then the whole atmosphere is brooding and cold and damp. It's a detective and it's a murder series, and jeepers, the setting matches the thing. It's perfect. Now, hey, if everybody's outside cheerful and there's a murder, it just doesn't work.
Well, I was talking to my son on a Zoom call there yesterday or the day before, and he's just outside New York, and it's really, really warm there. And he was saying he almost longed to get out of it. Of course, everybody's got air conditioning. Everybody's air conditioning. I still don't quite understand, Pat. I'm not satisfied with your answer on that one about why it is we feel gloomy when it's raining. Because, rain's if you imagine yourself, most of the time you're indoors when you're seeing the rain. And even you're outdoors, you can have a coat on.
But come on, Jude. See, I can see when we're finished this wonderful podcast, the sun's splitting a rock outside. I can go outside now and have a lovely cup of coffee and sit and relax. And what do you call it? There are a couple of cats and we have a couple of dogs out that way. I can relax. See, can you do that in the wet day? You're looking outside going...
You can sit at the window, Pat. You can sit at the window.
And depressed looking out. Yeah.
That's my point. No need to be depressed. You're just happy. T.K. Chesterton said, when it rains, we should be grateful because he says, we have not one world but two. And his thing was that all the buildings are reflected in the rain, the pattern of rain.
Wasn't it Winston Churchill or somebody said about the dreary steeples of Fermanagh?
I wouldn't take any heed of anything.
He said, but that's not
anything at all.
You see, on a dreary day, there's nothing cheerful.
Yeah. Well, I must say, they always say if Donegal got a roof in it, everybody
would all move there.
Okay. Let's move on from that subject, sweltering subject, and move into the world of politics. Micheál and a letter that has been sent out. Now, you want to tell us a bit about that letter first of all?
I just read it in the Irish Times this morning. Apparently, they had a big meeting. The Fianna Fáil National Executive had a meeting sometime, I think about Thursday or Friday last, and where they said there was intense anger, I think was the Express News, about criticism from certain of the TDs. But I presume it's the usual suspects, your man Micheál and Sligo, John McGuinness, and so on. They are less than impressed by Micheál Martin. On various levels, and of course the catalyst for the latest is the showing in Dublin where the Fianna Fáil candidate got less than 5%. It's got something like 1,200 votes, and the obviously, Jude, the thing is at Fianna Fáil, Fintan O'Toole, the famous columnist, wrote what would you say, a shearing criticism of Fianna Fáil about 10 days ago, where he said they were almost now sort of an irrelevance. They were on their way out. They had twice made a comeback, but he said it wasn't going to happen a third time, that their values no longer reflect the people of Ireland and so on. Now, Micheál Martin had a big response in the Irish Times as well. He said that Fianna Fáil had been central to the life of this country and had played its part in its democracy by maintaining media multiplicity and joined the EU and the rest. But you see, the thing about Fianna Fáil, it was all thanks to all people, Jude. It could be the friend of the sort of the multinational and the man in the street. And and it reached a stage, it had taken pragmatic politics to the to almost a ridiculous level. It stood for nothing.
Yeah. The executive is essentially, is that the members or does that include...
it's the ruling body.
Who's on it? Are there TDs on it, or is it?
Well, there's a committee of 15, and I think there's constituency representatives from each of the constituencies across the country, and they're the ruling body of So they're quite serious. But Jude, one of the things that came to mind too is the way you hear this thing about centralized control, but Sinn Féin and all the rest of it. I sort of laughed to myself. Here is this central executive of Fianna Fáil sending out this message. Listen, lads, don't be criticising our leader. So it's not, the Shinners are not the only party who like to have a bit of control.
Well, yes, I'm glad you added that, because I think all parties want to really keep their dirty linen indoors rather than outdoors.
Yeah.
I mean, take the DUP, for example. So in a way, I wouldn't fault them too much. And I think things have come to a pretty sorry state where you have articles being written in the Irish Times, and then you have Micheál Martin coming out and saying, trying to explain himself. It looks like internecine warfare through the Irish Times.
Well, you see, Martin is claiming because obviously he says that there's 80% of this government to go, but he's up for 2 years. What do you call him? Leo Varadkar's up for 2, and I don't know. Does Ryan? What do you call him?
Ryan doesn't get a part,
I doubt very much, but I don't know who gets the last year, or whatever, or maybe.
Well, I think I mentioned that he's going to be there for 2.5 years. Maybe I thought there was.
You could be right, Jude. I am definitely open to correction. But you're probably right, actually, because if they go the full term, it'll be 2.5 years each.
Well, I wouldn't be too sore on them, really, on Micheál Martin feeling sore, because they really should, except things are really bad, they really should keep their criticisms for within the party, because very, very few voters like a split party.
Oh, a split party. But you to cut across you, there's one thing too. There's a lot of leaking. When Fianna Fáil have a parliamentary meeting, all the Paul Cors of the various broadcasting outlets and the newspapers have it before the morning. It's usually in the paper. There was severe criticism of Taoiseach last night at Fianna Fáil parliamentary meeting. Now, the meetings usually start, I presume, somewhere about 7 o'clock and are over by maybe 9, half 9. It's in the papers by 11. And they've all got all the political correspondents have their sources, and they're always accurate, because so they've got somebody the minute it's over, they must ring some TD and say, look, hey, what happened tonight?
Well, I wonder what the reason for that is. I mean, it sounds like a lack of discipline within the party. If I was in Micheál Martin's shoes, I think I would make a point of tracing down who was the person who leaked, and I'd deal with them very summarily. In fact,
I think Jack Lynch, actually, there was a guy called John Healy who wrote a famous column in the Irish Times way back in the day, 1970s, and Jack Lynch, who was not, he wasn't as soft as a lot of people made out, but anyway, he wasn't the hardest of hard men. But anyway, at a cabinet meeting one day, he said, if I find out who leaks anything to John, he says, I am making an unequivocal guarantee, will be fired summarily. He says, there will be no, and apparently that put an end to it, because they were all sort of saying, watching themselves, but, everything was just being leaked to John, your man.
Well, I sort of understand it. I mean, I'm not too fond of Micheál Martin, but I kind of understand his point. However, a lot of people, well, you've just said that Fintan O'Toole is saying that they've, they're on their way out. They're essentially finished as a party. I don't think they are at all. I
don't buy that either. I think it's the case against their demise is not conclusive at all.
It's like Mark Twain.
I might be a bit premature. Exactly. Jude, I think it was you made the point the last day. They were supposed to be on their way out and all the rest of it. Yet when it came to the local government elections and the last round, Fianna Fáil near enough came top.
Why is Micheál Martin so uninspiring? Because I'll tell you something. Most politicians, you can't think of something specific, even let's say 1 or 2 things specific that they've done that were really important for the, I was almost going to say the country, the state in your case, right? But with Micheál Martin, I can think immediately. He was the guy who brought in no indoor smoking, no smoking in pubs, no smoking in restaurants. I mean, that was he was right ahead of the pack there, because England hadn't done that. And of course, when England got around to doing it, they said, oh, look at us, we're great, and nobody else has done this, and so on. I thought, I'd pat him on the back very sincerely for that. Why is it that he's seen as somehow a weak and a poor leader?
Jude, I think they're Fianna Fáil are in that sort of nexus thing. They used to be the plain people of Ireland's party. And then Micheál Martin went out front and on issues such as the abortion issue, and out front on same-sex marriage. And I think there's a lot of confusion. No, the Holy Rosary people no longer believe in the party, yet they're not sufficiently, with it and cool for the young people who are joining Sinn Féin and the Labour Party and so on. So Fianna Fáil have sort of got caught between two stools. Micheál Martin might be just a wee bit too ahead of the rank and file. Jude, if you'd see some of the criticism from Fianna Fáil people on social media about Micheál Martin and Liam Radke, about the fact that they've sold out the country and that they're little rich kids and all that sort of stuff and so on. It's amazing stuff, and a lot of it's not based in reality at all. Micheál Martin is not a rich kid or any of that sort of stuff, but that's the sort of stuff about the fact that about things like abortion and about their liberal agenda and all this sort of stuff. So I think a lot of the old people who had great faith in the Catholic Church and Fianna Fáil are finding themselves maybe without a party.
And you attribute that to the demise or the decline of Fianna Fáil?
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot. Like my mother, my father would have been a staunch Fianna Fáiler, but he would have been an old fashioned. He would have said these prayers at night, and he would have done, and so on. And like there was, Jude, for years, what was it? There was three stanchions or three pillars to the stool of the Irish state: Fianna Fáil, the GAA, and the Catholic Church. Now, But you see, modern times have changed so much.
Yeah, exactly the point, though. I mean, that's just where things have changed. I mean, the church has declined dramatically. So, and you should be saying really that Micheál's done the right thing, politically speaking. He's hitched his wagon.
But he's left a lot of his natural hinterland behind, and he hasn't gained traction with the other ones.
Well, if he hadn't done that, it would have maybe been even worse. It's hard to know, isn't it?
Possibly.
I mean,
it would have slid into oblivion quicker. But
if we could draw a comparison, the DUP is suffering. They thought they were suffering from the Alliance Party, but apparently it's Jim Allister in the TV. But you would think that history is on the side of the Alliance Party in the sense of their sort of liberal policies. And the same thing would apply to in the south of Ireland, where people with liberal policies rather than traditional Catholic policies, let's say, we're looking for people's vote. I just think if Micheál Martin had chosen to hang on to the traditional people, he would have paid a heavy price for it in terms of the less liberal people. The less traditional.
But Jude, you see, he's bringing a lot of history with him. And Ireland has changed so much in this last 15, 20 years, particularly. Changed a lot in this last 50 years, but the last 15, 20. If somebody emigrated to some far off spot in outer space in the 1960s and came back as an old person now and came back to the Ireland of today, they wouldn't recognize it at all.
Do you regret
morally,
that?
socially, economically. What?
Yeah, I agree with you. But do you personally regret that?
There's things that that we have left behind that were worth keeping. But there's parts of Ireland that don't regret losing at all.
You're glad that it's been kept and one that you're sorry to see go.
Well, Jude, the power of the Catholic Church, I had a major issue with. The good part. There were some very decent priests who did great work, and by the way, were, in my opinion, true followers of Jesus Christ. Them I put in a pedestal and still would. But see the abuse of power, the sexual abuse that was covered up, all the stuff that went on, and worked hand in glove with the state. Like I remember like Dave Valera went to see Charles McQuaid about some legislation about the family before in other words, the Catholic Church had a direct say on how our lives were lived. No, Jude, I don't miss that at all. Now, but the whole part, there was a sense of community and a decency in a lot of people. Now we seem to have gone very American. We come home, close our doors, and mind our own business.
I was thinking about that. Yeah. But you see, that thing about going to Charles McQuaid is absolutely true, and a lot of people are very critical of it. I've been critical of it myself. But you might want to say that if you were in Dev's shoes, you would simply accept. I mean, you'd have to accept the fact that John Charles McQuaid's word would be regarded very highly by a large portion of the population. So you better keep on the right side of him. So
I would hold on to it. Fianna Fáil had a lot of power too. And if the Taoiseach and the president had gone on out and said the Catholic Church is interfering big time in the affairs of our state to a degree that we find unacceptable, John Charles McQuaid would have had to pull in his horns as well. There was a balancing act there. They both had a lot of power, but they were all it suited them to play games together.
Well, you know, we were talking before we came on air about Trinity College. When I was at UCD, I mean, it was famous for the fact that you couldn't go to Trinity, and I knew guys going to Trinity for a cup of coffee in case they'd come out of mortal sin. But I mean, we sort of regarded John Charles McQuaid as a bit of a joke, and he didn't really interfere in our lives. We were happy enough going to UCD, and frankly, most of the people I knew would have thought of Trinity as a bunch of bloody English-leaning snobs. The thing about the Catholic Church influencing people. Now, I know there are many people, some within my own household, who would say, you know, yes, it was excessive, and you had all the time you had to get us squared with the local PP. I would weigh that against the good that an awful lot of them did. I mean, a lot of the priests when I knew when I was young, anyway, they really were very selfless people. Like,
that's why I went out of my way to acknowledge that at the start. I don't agree with these people who just slam everybody on the Catholic Church. That's not. That wasn't the way it was at all. And a lot of them are very good. Sorry, I cut across you. Go ahead.
No, it's a very interesting one. The greatest example I can think of in present day in fiction, of course, this is of a priest acting well is. Sean Bean was in a series. I've talked to you about this. You
were talking to me
Broken,
about that one.
Broken. Anybody can find that on the internet or wherever.
What do you call it again?
Broken.
Oh,
I tell you, that was one of the best series I've seen in a long, long time. It was very stylish. Sean Bean's acting was superb. I mean, it was just out of this world. And he was the priest.
He's also famous for doing the advert for Yorkshire tea.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's move. Just before we go, let's sing about challenging the leader. Some people thought that was a sign of things falling apart in the Sinn Féin when John O'Dowd stood against Micheál O'Neill. But I personally wouldn't. John O'Dowd's argument was, the position was there, and I was prepared to run for it, and fair enough. People want Micheál O'Neill, and that's it. I actually think that's a healthier state of affairs.
I can't argue about that. And in fact, sometimes, remember, was it John Major? He was getting so much carping from the backbenches. He said, right, he put himself, even though he was the Prime Minister, he said, right, let's have a leadership contest. I'm sure he won. Was it John Redford or somebody? Anyway, I can't remember who it was. But anyway, he won by a mile, and sort of that strengthened this position.
Well, it was neither way the guy that referred to the people in his cabinet as the bastards.
The bastards, to the ATN political correspondent,
Anyway, enough of that bad language.
Enough of that language, yes.
This is a family channel. Okay, let's turn, if you'll excuse the expression, to Boris Johnson. So we haven't left.
That's not a pleasant thought, the way you put that.
He has done an amazing U-turn. He said, that it was he himself and the new health secretary.
Rishi Sunak would have to self-isolate.
Was it Rishi? Yeah. Two were made to be
contacts.
But he said, no, we're going to get checked every morning, and that
this pilot scheme that nobody had heard of.
And then he suddenly realized that this is getting a lot of people's wick, and he said, well, of course, we what we're going to do is we're going to self-isolate.
Yes.
So he contradicted himself within 24 hours. Now, do you think that has damaged him?
Jude, I've reached a stage of wondering what sort of he has to do to the English soccer team, the last number of people who had to go to, and I thought, what do you call him, Gary Neville. It's amazing that a soccer player or a soccer pundit came out. He says, look at that guy. He's referring to Southgate. Honest, humble, tells the truth, easy to deal with. And he says, we have been lacking serious leadership. Look at Dominic Cummings. I went out before a parliamentary committee, said X, Y, and Z, and it rolled off Johnson's government. They're selling out the NHS. Jeremy Carmen warned that American insurance companies were coming in to take over. It was, look at that loony lefty. There he goes again. It's happening. Jude, what is like? And by the way, please, I have a lot of English friends, and so I don't mean this as offensive the way it is, but they deserve everything that's coming to them. When you vote for a clown, you get a circus, and that's what they've got.
Well, you know, he does appear a clown, but it doesn't seem to damage him. I mean,
No,
even when he does it, he's held in a tripwire with two Union flags. Two Union
He's
flags.
a liar. He's a cheat. And by the way, if he wants to sue me, there's so much evidence to stand over it. Like, I don't understand how anyone can vote for a man like that. I really genuinely can.
Well, is it not the Trump all over again?
That's exactly the point I'm making.
Yeah, but well, you know, if it works, it works. I mean, if people are going to ignore those things, well, then he might as well go ahead. I mean, what we're criticizing him for now is for his moral sort of consistency.
But we're right. If that's the case, we're back to that one. If there's going to be no principles, no rules, right? Why don't we just go out? Hey, there's a car over there. I like bollocks. I'll steal it.
No.
I'm going past your house. I don't like your window.
You're hiring as a politician.
Principles and government. Where do we stop?
You're not. No, I'm talking about, is the guy an effective ruler? A lot of people think that Trump was an effective ruler. I think they're wrong in that judgment, but that's what they think. And likewise, a lot of people think Boris Johnson's an effective ruler. I think they're wrong too, but that's what they're judging him on. They're not judging him on whether or not he, told the truth.
The facts and the figures against both are totally the other way. The trade deficits that the Britain and America are having at the minute are unbelievable, under Trump and all the rest of it. Johnson, if you look at his trade figures with the EU, have gone through the floor. Britain has one of the highest death rates from COVID that you could possibly. The Union, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland look like they're ready to break up. That's some legacy, and most of it is down to Johnson, because and the relationship with Ireland is on the rocks. His relationship with the EU is on the rocks. Do you consider that effective leadership?
No, I wouldn't actually. When you put it like that, you're right, Pat. But here's a question for you. Might it not be that he will muddle through? Will you be able to say in 5 years' time, do you think that what we're all saying, that Brexit will have made a total economic mess of the UK, that the UK will have creaked at the seams so much that it will have disintegrated in 5 years' time? And do you think that the people will see through Johnson and their misery of their economic situation, and they'll kick him out? Do you think those?
No, I think there's so many people in Britain have got this thing, harking back to the glory days. Jude, I remember sitting one time and outside. We're in Spain for a holiday, and there was this sort of apartment, and there was this English guy went past, going up to a bin, and he came back down, and for some reason started chatting to him, and I said to him, I said, we have been living here 20-something years, 25 years. And he says the wife wants to go back to, I think it was some part of Bradford. He says, and I says, well, what? And I remember he looked around, surreptitiously to make sure nobody was about. He says it would be like back living in Bangladesh. I think he reflected a review. A lot of English, they want England back to like Trump. When they said make America great again, what they really meant was make America white again, like the 1950s and 60s, where the white man ruled and where the old order prevailed. Apple pie and the picket fence. The same, a lot of people, Johnson is selling a dream to a lot of the white people in England. Hey, we can get our country back. We can take control back. We can make our own rules. It all sounds very, very good. But hey, it's a big, big world out there. The thing that we're doing, Zoom, the World Wide Web, communications, transport, everything is now, the world's got a small place. And I think to think that you can live isolated anymore is, it might be a nice idea. The whole idea of living on an island where nobody comes in affects you is a great thought, but it's not happening.
But you know that is a strong sort of drive in human beings. In fact, we reflected
absolutely.
We reflected it a while back there, where we were saying, there's a lot to be said for, something to be said for a generation or two ago, when there was a sense of cohesion in the community and so on. That doesn't seem to exist today.
But Jude, when you sell it as a narrative to divide, not as a narrative to unite, that's a big difference.
Yeah, good point. All right. It really is amazing how deeply people feel these things. I remember getting from Bristol Airport into the centre of Bristol one time, I got a taxi, and the taxi guy out of nowhere started talking about the immigrants.
Yeah.
And he gave off stink. He started by saying, "I'm nothing against immigrants. That's fine. I don't mind them coming here. But but if they come here, they've got to dress like English people. They've got to talk like English people. They've got to eat English food. We can't have them. If they're going to be here, they've got to be English, and that's the long and short of it. Not bringing these funny smells of their food and dressing up funnily and not learning English. They can't even speak proper English."
Yeah. So, me and my wife was there the day we met him. You know this wee Englishman out in Spain, and not the same Englishman as this other guy. Yeah. And we sort of know him, and he told me he had voted for Brexit because there was too many foreigners living in England. He was living in Spain.
Well, actually, I heard something of the same kind of thing in London. I was at a meeting of a group of Irish people, and I was talking to this woman who had emigrated to Britain from somewhere in Ireland, I think west of Ireland, about 1958 or something. And this now was about 1998, say. And she was giving out about these immigrants. They really were ruining the sort of the social fabric. And she didn't see any
irony in it at all.
But then you see, if we could come to our mutual friend, Ray Bassett, he would point out, and he's right too, we have an awful lot in common with the English.
Yeah.
Beyond any other race. Not us. Like, we're closer to the English than the French are. We're closer to the English than the Spanish are. Closer to the English than the Americans are. So we do well not to see ourselves as being.
I read Ray's book, and I have to agree with that. He says, irrespective of our checkered history, the reality is, I think the only place we have a common travel agreement with is the UK. People can come here without sort of really passports or whatever, and we can go there. We can get on a plane, and there's no big deal. Where and there's no other country. Britain doesn't have that agreement with France. It doesn't have that agreement with Germany. The only place it has with Ireland.
Well, I sent a letter to the Irish Times today in response to something.
I'm sure it'll be used.
It hasn't. I sent it yesterday, and it wasn't in today. Well, I'll be putting it up later on. But I'm not going into detail about it. But it was in response to a phrase that was used in the letters page by two people. And it was this, essentially they said this unhealthy obsession with England. Yeah. We have. Will you agree with that?
No, Jude, we've had 800 years of history with England. How did under God?
Is that the source of it? Do you think that's the source of the
obsession? Of course it is. Jude, our common law is lifted from English common law. We speak English. We used to speak Irish. They invaded here about, what was it? About 800 years, what was it, 800 and something, I can't even bloody well remember now. And they have had influence in our life, not by our choice. We have even at most between north and south, what about 6 million? They have 60 million. The sheer force of numbers has meant we have had to put up with oppression, subjugation, and everything else you can think of.
Well, it isn't the case like the life of Brian, where the Liberation Front of Palestine.
What did they ever bring for us?
Well, it's funny, because I was reading an article in the paper there the other day, and it was about a guy who was an Indian, and he was reflecting on the fact that Britain, or England, I suppose, had stayed in India, ruled India for 200 years. And he was reflecting on what would have happened, what kind of India would we have today if England hadn't ruled India. And I can tell you now, he wasn't saying really that they would have had a poor history. He was saying, yes, there were certain things, but he was saying there's all sorts of wonderful alternatives that never were realized. Would that be the case with us, do you think? I mean, I know this is daft, but it is all.
Jude, I can't answer, but put it, I guess, we had a rich culture that was all but destroyed. Well, now there's.
Well, as somebody said, we had got a culture when they were going around painting their backsides purple.
Yeah, yeah, and we had a rich land. We had our own fishing. We had so much going for ourselves. I think we could have had a very rich country with our own terms and conditions as an independent nation. And Jude, you're always going to get the pros and cons. But by the way, what you were saying earlier on reminded me of that old thing about the white man's burden. Like we civilized those people, and they should be good for us. Forget about the fact we stole their diamonds, their mines, the wealth, and the fact that we made most of them slaves. But we civilized them, and they speak our language. So let's be grateful. That smacks of that sort of stuff. Like I presume we could have made our own way in the world quite successfully.
Well, you see, I think the big thing that the British did was they taught us to despise ourselves in a way.
Yeah.
If you
want our language wasn't on our culture.
Yeah, exactly. If you wanted to be seen, leave aside the thing even of crushing the Irish language. If you wanted in our time to be seen as somebody smart, speak with an English accent.
Absolutely.
Especially a posh English accent. And,
you hear it on the BBC, the people from Bangor who speak with, how are you doing? You sort of go, Jesus, go and give us a break. I've never met anybody's, but when they're on the BBC, they're speaking, I was at a dinner party with such and such. And you're going, that's nobody I know speaks like that.
Yeah, but you see, it's this notion, and it was internalizing us. For example, when I was growing up, I sort of accepted the fact, when you're paying your money for the black babies, the penny for the black babies.
Yeah.
I sort of accepted the notion that these were, they were primitive people. They were really childlike, and you really did need white people going in there. Now, I never articulated it as clearly as that, but that was the way we it was the back of our heads. That was our thinking.
It was the patronizing way we were taught it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And we bought into it. Anyway, enough of Brit bashing. Now the poor people are having a hard time. And according to you, they're going to go flying off in all directions and implode in 5 years' time, right? Okay, the last one. That's your favorite topic, now, Pat. I think we want to talk a bit about sex.
Oh God,
Galway University is going to have very shortly an online hub on sexual consent. Now, you may wonder, what is an online hub on sexual consent?
I think
to help people understand the meaning and the importance of consent. That's going to be the key message of this new digital hub. And the hub will provide integrated, publicly available resources on sexual consent awareness and consent learning resources. Now, do you think that's a good thing, or do you think it's a bad thing? Or do you think
Jude, I couldn't be a bad thing, Jude. Anybody, if you have children, particularly female children, the very least you would hope that nobody ever harms them sexually or assaults them or anything like that, and that they get I don't think there's any woman maybe alive that at some stage hasn't had an experience that was less than pleasant. So no, Jude, I am totally, completely, and utterly in favor of it. And I think it's a very, very good thing.
But do you not think it makes things very tricky? Like, I mean, I know this is awful. I don't mean to be offensive, but when we were kids, one of the sort of jokes that smart remarks young guys would make, like I'm talking about 16-year-olds, they would say things like, "Stop it, I love it." Now that expression is crude, but what it was getting at, I think, was something quite interesting, and that was that women tend to think differently from men. And they don't think in the straight lines that men think in. And there's the old saying, it's a woman's privilege to change your mind. If you were a young guy setting out, I mean, leave that for a moment. Many romantic films and books are about guys who wouldn't take no for an answer. And, follow the girl all over the globe or whatever. And then in the fade out say he's won her. As she sees his devotion and so on. But if he did that today, that would be considered stalking.
Right, Jude, let me run you one, because I know you're struggling to come up one, but I have got a first-hand one, because I know exactly where you're trying to go with it. On the office in the Derry Journal many years ago, you remember there's a guy, I can't remember his name, he's a footballer, and he was charged with sexual assault. And anyway, it came out in court that he and this woman, they were at some sort of wedding or a reception, and they both got drunk, and he went up to the room with her, and whatever occurred, so on. Anyway, Micheál Burke, who was the BBC presenter, he was presenting Radio 4, and he made the comment that neither party come out of this with much whatever it was, not respect, but he says they were sort of fought, and he was lambasted by the sort of we'll call it the politically correct brigade. So we got into a big argument in the office that day, and I remember it as well. One of the girls said, "Wait a minute, that guy was totally wrong," and all the rest of it. And no matter how you come at this as a man, you're always going to be in the wrong, because I said, "Wait a minute." I remember very clearly a policeman, I think it was in New Orleans, two British tourists came to a hotel and were warned not to go to the black end of town because there was the poor end of town, and there was a lot of, and by the way, there was a black police chief actually who told them, he says, look, they were warned, he says, the only person you can blame for killing these two guys was, he says, the guy had shot them. But he said they were told not to go, and he says, there should be some sort of responsibility on the people to keep themselves safe. Now, that was the argument I used to the girl where I was working. I said, sure, there was some. Why blame the man totally? If she went, the girl who was involved with the footballer, if she went up to the room and whatever, now there was drink on board and all the rest of it, but was he totally, completely and utterly to blame? Or was there some responsibility in her and said, hey, wait a minute, stay at home? Now, if you rape somebody, the only person to blame is the rapist. But what I'm talking about is normal, like a lot of human interaction can get very confused.
Well, that's my point, actually, that if I'm very glad in some ways I'm old, because, chatting up a girl nowadays must be fraught with complications.
Yeah.
Because very often the guy's chatting up a girl, at first she mightn't be that keen, or she might be keen, as the case may be, but, there's a good chance that she mightn't be until you kind of get going and they see what a wonderful person you are.
Yeah.
But there'd be an awful danger attached to that, where, she might see this as you're sexually harassing her. I think there's too many things lumped under the heading of sexual harassment.
Another thing about it is, human nature hasn't changed. A 15 or 16-year-old boy is attracted to a 15 or 16-year-old girl or whoever it is. That's the way it is. And that's what makes the world go around. That's why we have families. That's why and all the rest.
That's right. But the question is, how do you have them interact then?
Yeah, it's a bit of a minefield now.
What people seem to be saying now is that by and large, men don't realize that they have to get the consent of the girl or the woman. I'm wondering, is that much more complicated than we're actually?
No, maybe it's not complicated at all. I really don't know. Speaking from personal experience, you soon got the message if somebody didn't fancy. I've not happened on many occasions. So you just and like I presume Jude, I've seen guys that I knew were just pests. Like if I had been a woman, I would have slapped them, gone bugger off. It's the ones that you meet in the middle where it's sort of in between that somebody just misread the signal and for a good and genuine reason. That's where the friction comes in.
Yeah, maybe you see, this is something we're almost looking back on as older people.
Yeah.
Maybe for young people, it's not a problem. They know how to, handle themselves, and they realize when they're just
Jude, I wouldn't go that far either, because there's been quite a few. If you read a lot on social media, there's a lot of things that it's become a sort of a minefield for because of all this sort of awareness about sexual abuse, about stalking, about a lot of young fellas, and in fact they reckon a lot of young fellas have actually changed their whole attitude. A lot of them even won't approach someone in case it's misinterpreted and so on.
Yeah, well, I think that's a danger. It seems unfortunate but it is also true, of course, that I'm sure you remember, there were guys who really were sort of sexual pests, usually based on the notion of themselves as being God's gift to women.
Jude, I remember guys who were definitely sexual predators. Of that, there is no doubt. And God, I remember I used to work in a bar, and I remember one guy. Had I known a cop well, I would have definitely reported him. Back in the day, and I was only a young fellow at the time. He used to sort of hang around, make sure some woman was half drunk before he approached her. And it was, and by the way, Jude, everybody knew he was at it. That's one that sticks out in my memory, Jude. And I was only about 15 or 16 at the time.
Yeah. Here's a final question on that, Pat, and we'll just wrap up with it. That's being offered in Galway University.
Yeah.
Now, this whole question, we're agreed, I think, that the whole question of sexual consent is a very important one.
Yeah.
And therefore, you could argue it's worthy of study at a university and anywhere else for that matter. But you could also argue that learning to swim is a very good social skill to have, or playing bridge, playing poker, playing bowls, conversational openers, arguing with people, darts. Should those be taught at university?
No, but they should. I don't think you're comparing apples with apples there. You know, I don't know if Jude, by the way, I don't even mean to insult your intelligence in the least, that was that comment, but so you could be right in another way. Do we need to be taught how to behave?
Oh, yes, we definitely do need to be taught.
Academically taught.
Well, you certainly needed to be taught. The question is, why wouldn't you be academically taught as well? Like, if you take kids in a primary school, you know, one of the things is...
Should your mother and father not teach you how to behave? Should your family not tell you?
Yeah, maybe they should.
But do you have to go to university to learn? Hey, by the way,
pull it back a bit from university, Pat. When I went to St. Colum's, I used to get a report card, and I mean, I was very bad in the subjects, but there also was a section on behavior. And my God, they were after me for everything. So I hadn't learned to behave myself, and behaving yourself was seen as a very important part of your development.
Oh, yes. Always part of your character, yes.
So my point is, why not teach? Why do we teach the things we teach in universities, and we say those are worthy of being taught, like in this case, sexual consent, and it certainly is a very serious and important issue in society. But once you get into teaching social things, then it does seem to me you're moving off from what we certainly traditionally have thought of as being the purpose of a university. We're saying, give people social skills, you know, teach them how to address a group of people. You know, for example, you know yourself that talking to a group of 100 people or even 20 people is a very different matter from talking to a group of 1 or 2. So absolutely. Why aren't those things being taught?
I agree totally. But I don't agree with you that, Jude, someone tells me that on matters of behavior, it's our peers, or particularly our family, that should be in primary position. And sometimes, why does a university? So, I'm going off on a tangent, but why does a university need to introduce a course like this, or a sort of a feature like this? But anyway, maybe it's a matter for the sociologists and the sexologists and all the rest of it.
No, it's not a matter for them, Pat. It's a matter for us. We're the ones that are funding the universities.
Yeah.
So we're the ones who should be able to say whether or not they're using the money well.
But do you agree with this?
Well, I have mixed feelings. I remember when I was very young, not very young, but when I was a teenager, people used to talk about the American system of education. And they used to say, God almighty, you should see the stuff they get degrees in America.
Yeah, I remember
There's a degree in swimming, you know, there's a degree in swimming. And everybody say, oh, for God's sake, have a bit of sense. And then I began to think about it. And actually, if you were to consider it, swimming could be approached from all sorts of angles, which would be worth doing. I mean, in terms of physical fitness, in terms of the law of whatever the equivalent of gravity is in you in the water. There's any number of aspects of swimming. You get social history of swimming, any number of things that you could do in teaching a degree in swimming. I know for a fact that down in the University of Limerick, a guy I know, he was from County Derry actually, or County Londonderry, as you'd probably say. He said that he had introduced. He said they were down in Limerick, and he said, "What's important around Limerick?" And down that general direction, and he said, "Horses." He says, "Why aren't we using this? Why aren't we teaching things associated with the horse?" And in no time at all, he had a course in equine studies. And they were able to approach it from a whole range of views: practical, theoretical, social, historical. And when you think about it, and nearly an awful lot of things that we would dismiss as being worthy of study are actually very worthy of it, depending on how you.
But by the way, Dr. Collins, I've just looked at the clock. We're way over our time.
Oh, thanks a lot. If you were a girl and I was going to date,
I think we're on about an hour now.
If you were a girl and you looked at your watch like that on the date, the poor guy would think he was in danger of being reported to the police. Okay, Pat.
Okay, Jude, catch you later.